We're going to be talking about the units of chemistry, and the units of chemistry are basically a set of regulated and systematic units that we use in chemistry to express distances, mass, time, temperature, and really any other physical quantity. And in the real world, although there are several ways that we can actually do this, such as centimeters or foot. In chemistry, scientists all over the world have agreed to use a regulated system that are called units of chemistry. And the first thing that we need to know that this units of chemistry are basically the metric system. And you guys have probably heard what the metric system is before. And in chemistry, all scientists have agreed to use the metric system for whatever reason. And the metric system is also often referred to as the SI units. And the SI here stands for Systematic System International. And it basically means that it is a set of units that scientists have agreed to use all over the world. And the second thing is base units. And base units are basically pure units that are used to measure physical quantities. So basically, some examples are meters is a base unit to measure distance, liters, and grams. And the reason measurements such as centimeters and kilograms aren't considered base units is because they can actually be divided into two. For example, centi can be divided into the prefix of centi and the meter. So the meter would be the base unit and the centi would be prefixes, which we will cover later. And kilograms is the same as well. Kilo is the prefix and grams is the base unit. So these aren't base units because they have a prefix in front of them. Now these are the two basic things that you need to know to properly calculate measurements or physical quantities in chemistry. And we're going to be covering some basic units as well. And the first physical quantity is mass. And this is one of the most common ones that we use in chemistry. And for mass, we most often use kilograms. And the abbreviation for this would be obviously kg. And I think that's pretty basic, first of all, starting off. And the second one is length or distance, whatever you want to call it. And to measure length in chemistry, we use meters, as said before, and they are obviously abbreviated by m. And the third one is time. And time is it slightly changes on what you're measuring, but we most often use seconds. And seconds are obviously abbreviated by s. Now, temperature is slightly different than the norm. Temperature is slightly different because we use another unit that isn't Kelvin or Fahrenheit. And to measure temperature in chemistry, we most often use, or almost always use, Kelvin. Not Celsius, but Kelvin. And Kelvin is slightly special because Kelvin is also commonly known as the absolute temperature. And the reason it's called the absolute temperature is because there cannot be a negative integer in front of Kelvin. So there cannot be -1 Kelvin. The smallest unit of temperature that we can measure by using Kelvin is 0 Kelvin. So that's why it's called the absolute temperature. And Kelvin is abbreviated by the letter K. And going on to the fifth category of substances. And substances is referring to a bit of molecular chemistry, and it's kind of to measure more smaller substances. And for that we use moles, or commonly known as the Avogadro's number. And to measure moles we simply use MOL. And although there are a bit more, such as electric, for which we use ampere, and luminosity, which we use candela, but these are a bit more of extra information that we don't really need to know right now. So there are 6 main categories that you should know. And yeah, so as I said before, there are base units, and for a lot of the base units we put prefixes in front of them, such as centi or kilo, to measure them in further conciseness and effectiveness. And although we use prefixes on a daily basis, there are some extra ones that we need to know if we're going to learn chemistry. And prefixes are very important to memorize, because if we don't know the prefixes, commonly we won't be able to solve questions and understand information or data correctly. Now, some of these you might have probably heard of, such as mega, giga, kilo, centi, and milli, but there are also uncommon ones such as tera, hecto, deca, deci, micro, nano, and pico. So you're gonna have to memorize all of this, and although there are a few more such as femto or maybe atto, those are a bit more niche, and these 12 in total should be enough for you to understand most information that you need to in regular chemistry. Now, this can be divided into 2 categories. First of all, the upper 6 and the bottom 6. And the upper 6 are commonly called positive prefixes, and the bottom 6 are commonly called negative prefixes. And it might be self-explanatory, but it is due to the reason that the first 6, if we look at their values, they have a positive integer to the power of 10, such as 12, 9, 6, 3, 2, and 1. And the bottom 6 have negative integers, such as -1, -2, -3, -6, -9, and -12. So we can split it up into 2 main categories of prefixes. And in the first column we have the name of the prefix, such as tera, giga, mega, kilo, hecto. And in the second column we have abbreviations. So when you see a chart of information, it might not say tera, and it most commonly would say T, G, or M. So it is important that you know these abbreviations as well. And in the third and fourth columns we obviously have the quantity, or the meaning of the prefix. So for tera, the abbreviation would be T, and it means that 10 is multiplied 12 times. For giga, it's multiplied 9 times, mega, it's multiplied 6 times, and the list goes on. So at first when you see this graph or chart, it might be slightly intimidating to memorize, because some of these you've never seen before. So the first 3 of each positive and negative prefixes, so basically from kilo to milli, there is actually a more simpler way, or an easier way to memorize that is slightly helpful in some way, or at least it was helpful for me to memorize. And the way we memorize that is by learning this short phrase of King Henry died drinking chocolate milk. And this works because this phrase is quite memorable, or at least it was for me. And if we look at this phrase, King Henry died drinking chocolate milk, and if we look at the first letter of each word, K, H, D, once again D, C, and M, we realize that these 6 are the first 6 prefixes. K would be kilo, H would be hecto, D would be deca, and then going on now to the negative side, deci would be D, C would be centi, and M would be milli. So basically, if you just know this phrase of King Henry died drinking chocolate milk, you'll be able to remember that, oh yeah, first of all, K is kilo, 10 to the third power. H is hecto, 10 to the second power. D is deca, 10 to the first power. And now moving on to the negative side, when where the comma is, D would be deci, 10 to the negative 1. C would be centi, 10 to the negative 2. And M would be milli, 10 to the negative 3. So this is a short cheat code that you can memorize at least the first 6 with some ease, but the rest you kind of have to just memorize by brute force. So those were the prefixes that you need to learn for chemistry. So if you know these basic 12 prefixes along with the basic units of chemistry of the metric system, and you have some knowledge of base units, you'll be able to understand most information given to you in regular chemistry.